document called exists. Make sure to call get at the end after the document method. We have this exist property where if it actually exists in our database, it's going to resolve to true. And only in that case do we want to delete it. And so when that resolves to true, we can update it by saying document.reference.update data. We can pass in the map that we had before with our other user. And the same applies to delete user. We will query for it first with get, put it in our final doc variable that again is of type document snapshot, and only if it exists do we want to make that request. So let's first update our user, update the user that is currently Bob to username John. So Bob is now John, and then to delete him, run delete user. And I made the mistake of not copying over the new ID for delete user. Let's try that again. And now John's gone. So now we have full CRUD functionality for our Firestore documents. We can create, read, update, and delete them. Before we close out this section covering how to use the Firestore real-time database with Flutter, I want to talk about how we're going to structure data within our database. What is the optimal way to, for example, get a collection of users, get a collection of posts, get information about our users? For example, if we want to know whether the current user is following another user, how do we structure our database to optimize that? Up until this point, we've really just discussed how to work with collections and documents. We haven't talked about the optimal way to organize them. So even though we know a bunch of ways now how to ask for a certain piece of data, for example, finding a user that has a certain post count or a username, we haven't talked about optimization. What's the best way to do that? And despite the fact that we're using a NoSQL database here, there is a better way of structuring our database to be able to get data faster, to have it scale better. So when our user base expands, we don't have issues with our database. And also, how do we get exactly the data that we need? No more, no less. The first tip is to avoid too much nested data. So remember at the beginning, we talked about how we could add to a document a separate collection. So for example, on a user, we could store a collection of posts. Now this is a pattern that we generally want to avoid because whenever we fetch a user, say we want to get Fred's user information here, and for example, maybe we just want to display his information in the header or something like that. We don't want to get his post. Regardless, if we've added a collection onto a given document, we're going to be fetching that collection every single time. So instead of including multiple types of data on a single collection, we want to scaffold it out and to break it up into multiple different collections. So in addition to a user's collection, we're going to have a post collection. So we want to avoid nested data structures, and we want to avoid adding a lot of data to an individual document. Instead, we're going to prefer to have multiple collections that store different pieces of data, different types of data in our application. So for example, because we want to keep track of users that are following one another, we want to have a followers collection. So say we want to get all of the followers for a given user. What's the best way to structure this collection so we can make the newest request in order to get that information and to just get exactly what we asked?
What's up, guys?
User document.
It's one of those boring.
To see, for example, all of a user's posts.
It's one of those boring days where I got nothing to do. Might as well just watch me do fuck on.
And then reuse that when creating other pieces of information about them. For example, their followers. So, for example, when the user Fred in this case